I make art about identity, my identity. My work represents who I am as a young woman interacting with social media, fashion, sexism, sexuality, stereotypes, and expectations, especially against the backdrop of American conservative evangelicalism and the male gaze. I use color, texture, line, and shape to represent myself and, by extension, others in my demographic in ways that converge and diverge from cultural expectations. I don't think it's right to make blanket statements about groups of people or to tell you what I think you're doing something wrong. Instead, my work is about who I am and how I experience the world around me, not about what you need to change. In my work, I search for new ways to represent myself and others like me. Artists doing similar work to this about what it means to be a woman are Joan Senel, Stephanie Saijuko, and Jenny Saville. These three artists all work with self-portraiture addressing themes of sexuality and identity, especially in a culture that functions in relation to the male gaze. Semel created images of her view down her own body that are not for the male gaze. Currently, she creates drawings and paintings that show the effects of age on the body in a society obsessed with young, idealized bodies. Stephanie Saijuko's work testifies to how identity can be confusing and complicated. She questions her own identity by obscuring her face in her photography. Jenny Saville's large-scale nude self-portraits attack the narrow conventions of the male ideal for a woman's body. She asserts her right to exist. I join these women in asserting my right to exist and to define my own identity. All of my work is self-portraiture. Most of the work you see today stems from a daily self-portrait project that I started a few months ago. I was interested in the way that social media, like Snapchat, normalizes constantly sharing images of ourselves with others. I use Snapchat every day to connect with friends and share my experiences throughout the day. I also use social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to share images, thoughts, and experiences with others online. And these media create and define our image. We tend to create an identity online that depicts the way that we want to be seen by others. I find myself taking photos at angles that make me look skinnier or taller, or use filters to remove blemishes on my face or look like I'm wearing more makeup than I really am. So in a society obsessed with social media, it's very easy to create and share an identity that doesn't even look or act like us. So looking at Snapchat specifically, the streak function documents how many days in a row two individuals have sent each other daily photos. I decided to begin a project that connected my Snapchat habits with my drawing habits. So for about 2 months, I took a selfie daily and sent it to my streaks. Then, based on that selfie, I used it as a reference for a 5 to 15 minute sketch. To conclude the project, I documented each drawing and uploaded it to an Instagram page. From these simple sketches and drawings were born many other artworks that are more detailed and more layered, and I continued developing. At around the same time, I started a series of monotype studies using donated window panes from my neighbor. I would paint a quick drawing that was based on those selfies from earlier onto the glass and then print that monotype onto paper. I've included my favorite one in the show. While most of my work begins with these instantaneous selfies, these drawings build into paintings and sculptures and books. My photo book, Hello, My Name is a multimedia project that references the construction of the feminine identity and my unique identity. I use print, receipts, post-it notes, lists, tracing paper, poetry, images of myself and my artwork, and transparencies to create a compilation of media that represents my daily life. Each page tells a story of where I've been, what I've done, and what I've spent my time and money on. It contains aspects of my daily life which document my everyday existence. These ideas connect to An Kawar's work, which commemorates and legitimizes his existence by simply documenting that he got up on a particular day in a particular place. My work both does this and exposes the complex and layered aspects of identity that are often hidden or forgotten. When I was working with documentation like this, I realized how important clothing was to my own identity. I became really interested in the clothes we choose to wear and the way we show and share our bodies. In this aspect of our identity, women often participate in stereotypes that we don't intend to. Artists doing work with clothing and identity are Charles Ray and Cindy Sherman. Ray's work, All My Clothes, show him wearing each of the outfits that he owned. My work references his and claims that as women, our clothing choices are even more scrutinized, stereotyped, and judged by those around us. Historically, as John Berger states, men act, women appear. I actually did my own All of My Clothes project and documented every top, dress, and skirt or pair of pants in my closet at the time. Ray's collection contained 16 images, while mine contained 95. Documenting these took around 4 days of multiple hours of photographing with an amazing photographer, hastily changing from outfit to outfit to outfit. And throughout this documentation, I became aware of the fact that I wear many different types of clothing for the different realms of life that I'm involved in. I have my work clothes, I have clothes that I wear to classes and to school, professional attire, date night clothing, etc., etc. My identity, even in my clothing choices, is complex and layered and can't be simplified under one label. As I began looking closer at how fashion, clothing, and identity intersect, I started working in a familiar medium, oil paint. At certain times, during my artistic practice this year, I felt that I was losing my own identity, and all I had left was a shell of clothing that made me who I was. To represent this, I chose to realistically render the clothing on my body, but leave my skin rendered either incompletely or unrealistically. I was looking at the way that it feels to have clothing define who we are. These paintings mark a point where I was not confident in who I was. However, the feelings that inspired these pieces are still valid and a part of who I am, which is why I've included them in my show. Similarly, Cindy Sherman uses clothing to create different identities for herself that she captures in photographs. For her, a particular type of clothing and setting creates an identity as a social signifier. Although it was difficult to realize for myself, I believe that just because a person wears a particular type of clothing doesn't mean that they are required to act a certain way. This is evident in my Cyanotype series, where I carefully documented different types of lingerie to show that it can be appreciated for its line and shape, apart from its sexual connotations and definition under the male gaze. I created this work using an exposure unit and cyanotype chemistry to print the lines of the items using light. After sketching clothing, then painting and printing it, I took a step further and began using the actual clothing as my art. Some of my pieces are made up of my old clothing wrapped or hung on wooden frames. The frame alludes to a body. My clothing pieces reference Duchamp's ready-mades, as they're essentially an item of mine placed on display. Duchamp took an item and pointed at it and said, "This is art." I'm taking my clothing and I'm saying, this is a representation of my identity, and therefore, this is art. In my tights piece, I wrapped the structure almost completely in the fabric to speak to clothing in itself as an art form, and the body's interaction with the cloth that we stretch on top of it. After creating a series of these abstract structural pieces, I did a series of paintings on my old sweaters. In these pieces, I returned full circle to the design and sketches that were based on my selfies. I experimented with color and shape using rough line drawings of my figure on a shirt that I stretched out as if it was a canvas. Using clothing as my canvas gave me a new texture to play with in my work. I like how it creates a unique piece, and I like it because my painting is on an item of clothing that holds memories not only for me, but for the people with whom I interacted while I was wearing that clothing. These pieces allude to the relationship between body and covering because of the head holes and arms of the sweaters. When I say that my work both converges and diverges from cultural expectations, I mean that sometimes I represent myself in ways that go against what the mainstream culture and male gaze expect, but at other times, I duplicate the way culture already says women. In both cases, I'm critiquing the male gaze. Sometimes I critique it by directly opposing it, and other times I critique it by using it and inviting viewers to question its use. All in all, my show consists of a collection of pieces from the last year that document and tell a story of how it feels to be me. My artistic practice is an ongoing series that represents the complexity of being a young woman grappling with sexuality and social media in today's society.